This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Franny's Pharmacy.
Now more than ever, it's important that our society focuses more on our mental and physical health. At Franny's Pharmacy, the team is committed to their community's need of being happy, healthy, and stress-free. Come learn how Franny's Pharmacy can assist you in a clean, professional environment with their expert bud tenders that are excited to educate you about the benefits of their lab-tested, DEA-certified CBD products. Franny's Pharmacy also offers wholesale and franchise opportunities. Visit their website at frannysPharmacy.com, and that's pharmacy with an F, and use the promo code CannaConnect10 for an exclusive Cannabinoid Connect discount. Again, that's Franny's Pharmacy with an F.com, and use the promo code CannaConnect10 for an exclusive Cannabinoid Connect discount. Franny's Pharmacy, putting the farm back into pharmacy. Nohtal, what's up, man?
What's up, Kevin? How's it going?
I'm doing well. I gotta say, I like your Zoom background, man. It's very fitting for those that are just listening and are not watching this podcast. Nohtal is in space, basically hovering above Earth with the satellite right next to you. Is that right?
That's the International Space Station.
Oh, the international. Okay, see, I didn't even know that. And I'm going to learn so much today because it's fitting, that background, you being a former NASA employee working for JPL. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is going to be a fascinating conversation because you have an extensive career at this point building robots. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about, maybe what kind of kickstarted that passion and interest for robotics, and then, your time with NASA-JPL and Project MOXIE, I believe, is what you were integral in working on. And we'll move on from and then talk about your work in cannabis.
Okay. Cool. Wow. You want to start from the beginning, huh?
The beginning of time. Yeah. Yes.
The beginning. So let's see. I first was interested in robotics, when I was really young. I always have the first memory of me being into robots, playing a game, playing Sonic the Hedgehog. Did you ever play that game?
Of course.
Yeah, so like Dr. Robotnik was like kind of not like my hero, but like I just like really liked his like robots and stuff. And so that was really cool. I always thought it was really awesome to have these like autonomous machines that like go and like do your bidding sort of thing. Right? And it was really awesome. And then like as I was growing up, I would do robotics. Like I went to like a robotics camp. Was really into like hobbies, like RC hobbies and stuff like that.
How old were you then? Like middle school, high school time?
When I was doing the robotics camps,
I
think I did my first one when I was in like the 5th grade, something like that.
Okay.
And then like building robotic or like building RC airplanes and stuff like that, like 10, 11, 12, 13 RC cars, all these like sort of kind of like remote mechanized things.
Were you a fan of BattleBots?
Oh, dude, I loved BattleBots. I like was so into BattleBots from the age of, I don't know, 7 till whenever they took it off the air and then eventually put it back on the air.
Yeah, it's a newfound like passion of mine, man.
Oh, really? Cool.
I'm so into it. Not like from the engineering perspective, just because that stuff's way over my head, but I'm just fascinated with what they're creating and how, each bot has its own advantages and weaknesses, right? In the way in which they build them. And it's really become this huge sport, and it seems like when I think about BattleBots, I almost kind of think about cannabis as well, in that it's such a new burgeoning thing that it's kind of ahead of its time in a way. Like BattleBots, what's that movie with Hugh Jackman where he like fights with the robot with his son? They train.
Yeah.
So I forget what it's called, but that's what the future is, right? I feel like that's the future of BattleBots, like these huge monstrous machines just battling it out in a ring, or
like
something.
Gundams almost at that point.
Exactly.
Oh, what team do you like on BattleBots? Do you know of Sawblaze?
Sable. See, I mean, I'm not quite there yet in terms of knowing actually all the, but I watch it whenever it's on. You know what I mean? But
Oh, okay, cool.
what about this team? What's
Actually, that team is like an MIT based team, and one of the members of that team and like the captain or like the one of the members of the team used to work at JPL. And she was in one of my groups and like we worked together and stuff. And
wow?
then yeah, so it was really cool. Like I remember when she told me she was like, "Oh yeah, I'm on this BattleBots team." And this was like the first season they came back in like 2015 or 2016. I was like, "Yo, can I like get on the team?" And I was like so into it. And then but I guess it was like their like MIT like group or whatever. And so yeah, but they have like they even have toys and stuff now. I think that was really interesting. It's cool seeing how there are these different groups and they're just like normal people that are like building the robots. And I remember watching those groups of people when I was younger and I was like, oh man, I wonder what it would be like to be those people that build a team or build these robots. And then I was like, oh wow, now I know some of these people and they're just like normal people that are good at robots, which is kind of cool.
Right. Which is probably a real small subset of people, right? Like once you get to that level of engineering and understanding and building robots at that level, like I'm sure you kind of know each other and you're familiar with faces in that community.
Yeah, I mean, especially for BattleBots, I think also like one of the teams in BattleBots was a part of Sawblaze, or like the guy who like started the other team, and then they like broke off because the team was getting too big, and then now there's two teams and they like kind of battle against each other and stuff, but they're both based out of MIT, so it's like yeah, it's a small group of people.
Right. Well, you mentioned JPL and your connection with that woman who's now within BattleBots. But why don't you tell us about your experience with JPL? I mean, I think I listened to a podcast that you were on in 2021, and this MOXIE, Mars Oxygen in Situ Resource Utilization Experiment, right?
Yes, that's
Very
it.
long-winded, but I basically it's a mission to produce oxygen on Mars. Is that right?
Yeah, so that process is basically ingesting the atmosphere of Mars, which is about like 96, 97% CO2. And then it applies a bunch of heat to the carbon dioxide. And that heat makes the molecules vibrate like violently. And then they start to break apart. And then it applies an electric field. And then that pulls it apart even further. And then it turns the CO2 into O2 and carbon monoxide. And then the idea with that experiment is to say, like, yes, we can prove that we can ship a device to Mars, and then we can produce oxygen from the atmosphere of Mars. It's basically a technology demonstrator to say, yes, we can do this. And the reason why you want to make oxygen on Mars is because of two main reasons. One, if you're going to have people go there, you need oxygen, and you can't just drag the oxygen with you from Earth. It's too heavy, it's too expensive. So you want to be able to make it there. And basically, they're like mining the atmosphere of Mars for oxygen. And then the other way is that you actually need it for rocket fuel. So if you ever want to get back from Mars, um, and you need like a huge ship to do it, you can't bring the oxygen and all the fuel you need with you. You need to get it there and then make the fuel there and then bring it back. So this way they can get the oxygen, liquefy it, so it gets compressed, and then they can mine methane out of the ground, and then you can have like a methane oxygen rocket engine, and then it'll shoot you back.
Wow. So, okay, there's a lot to unpack with that. It's super fascinating. So, like, what was your involvement with Project Moxie, and how long did this project, go on until it proved success?
Well, it's been successful now. It's on Mars producing oxygen. It's already met all of its mission criteria in terms of producing oxygen at a given rate and doing it in different locations and in different environments. Now they're just like it's gone beyond mission success criteria, and now they're just experimenting with it. Um,
What
so
experiments, like what other applications are they thinking about?
they're just trying to like run it really hard. So
Oh,
normally it's baseline for 6 grams an hour of oxygen, which isn't a lot of grams of oxygen, as you would assume. But they are now like trying to do like 10, 12 grams of oxygen per hour or 20 grams of oxygen per hour by just like trying to run it really hard, because that's not exactly what it's made for. But they're going for, just extra production, because that's something that once you meet all your mission criteria, you want to, explore, see if you can push things harder than they were before.
Right, right. What's, I mean, futuristic question here, forward thinking. When, like, will we be visiting Mars in a regular capacity, and where, MOXIE technology will be super relevant and valuable?
Um, I guess it depends, like if the Russians want to go to Mars or something like that. Right? It's like if Russia or China decides that, you know what, we're gonna put a base on Mars, I guarantee you we'll get there a lot faster. Like, for
That
sure.
incentive, huh? Yeah, we need some incentive.
Yeah, usually war is a good incentive to make technology. But save from any Cold War sort of funding that could, increase NASA's budget. I mean, it's gonna be a while. I know in terms of pop culture, Elon Musk tries to say, oh yeah, 2025 we'll have people on Mars, or 2024, whatever
Yeah,
the
he
last number
tweeted the other
was.
day. He's like, in our lifetime, we will like be colonizing Mars or something like that. I don't want to, misquote him directly, but it was something along those lines. So yeah,
Yeah,
what are your
I don't
thoughts on
know
that?
about that. Um, so I don't think it's gonna be. I mean, I think within our lifetime there will be a human on Mars for sure. Colonizing is like a whole other thing, right? Colonizing requires um, quite a lot of energy, both in financial and just like chemical. Like, just you need a lot of energy to get there. Um,
He might not have said
yeah.
colonizing. You're right. That's a bold term. Let me
I mean, he might have. He said crazier stuff.
it's true.
So yeah.
You don't really
Um,
know. Yeah, that's a good point.
but I would say in terms of getting a human there, um, if we're lucky, within 2030 to 2040, I would say.
Okay.
Yeah. That's just because right now we barely have gotten to Mars and done kind of the basic things, right? Like, we produced oxygen. We're like now mining the surface of Mars to find liquid water, to find hydrocarbons. And so those are kind of the very baby steps you need to build a colony, or just to have people there. Um, so I would say 2030, 2040, that's after a few NASA missions where they get stuff back from Mars. They're able to launch additional missions. You probably have like 2 or 3 more missions to Mars exploratory and robotic. And then after that, they're probably good to go with humans.
Is it true? I think I read somewhere that they said they've discovered remains of water on Mars.
Yeah. Well, they were able to find ice sheets a couple years ago where there was like actual like frozen water, and they were like, oh, okay, there's definitely water on Mars. And then they're also hypothesizing that like under the surface there's a lot of ice as well. So like, ice is water, right? It's just frozen.
Right.
um so yeah, there's definitely water there, but none of it's like really liquid and flowing. Like, there's no rivers, there's no temperatures that you need really to support life.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
It's fascinating stuff, man. Okay, so you've given us a glimpse of NASA. So how long were you there, and what made you jump into the world of cannabis, where you're now serving as the co-founder and CEO of Sorting Robotics?
Yeah, so I was there for like 3.5 years, mostly working on the MOXIE project as the lead mechanical engineer, doing like a lot of the design work. And I don't know if you Google MOXIE, it's like this big gold box. So I did the design work for that gold box, and then if you open the gold box on the inside, all of those pieces on the inside are the preliminary designs, and then I focused specifically on the heart of the instrument, the one that produces the oxygen. So I kind of touched every piece of it. Um, and then basically in 2018, when I kind of saw that project tapering off, it's been almost 4 years at JPL, and I was just kind of getting a little disillusioned with the speed that things move at, because that is, it's NASA, it's built to be it's built to be slow. Like they're not
Right.
really a move fast and break things sort of group, because
Mhm.
their projects are going to different planets, so you can't really like have them break. And so uh it's meant to go very slow. And so that was a little frustrating. Although I loved working on that project because it was really, really cool. And now I look up into the night sky and I see like that little red dot. I'm like, oh yeah, that's where my thing is. So
It's
that's kind of a
awesome.
cool feeling. And everyone
Yeah.
there is super, super smart. But it was just like the speed of the work, and like how that bureaucracy is kind of embedded for good reason, but it's still embedded in that nature.
Hmm.
So then me and one of my co-founders were working there and said, hey, you know, let's like try something else. Let's try to go out on our own and start a robotics company, maybe something that we can do and by ourselves and like live off of and kind of provide to like small, medium-sized businesses. So we got with our third co-founder, and then we built our first robotic solution, and that was actually a robot that did sorting of Magic the Gathering cards for e-commerce sellers. It was called the Roka Sorter.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why cannabis? I mean, did you have a previous passion, or did you have experience with the plant previously, or was just something that you just saw an opportunity because, hey, it's a multi-billion dollar industry that's at the forefront of growth and expansion?
Yeah, so it was kind of like this progression of becoming more and more sophisticated as a business owner. So we had the Roka Sorter, and then eventually we noticed that that market was a little bit smaller than we would have liked, and we wanted to build a big robotics company. And to do that, you need a big market to serve. And so then we got into a startup accelerator called Y Combinator. And
Sure.
then
Yeah.
once we were in there, we knew we had to find a bigger market if we wanted to, raise venture money and start to grow a big company. So we then started searching for different markets, and it was like almost 4 months of customer development, just trying to figure things out, see where it made sense. And then eventually we came across cannabis. And noticed that there was really no good automated solutions, and there was no kind of forefront robotics company because of its legal status. A lot of these big companies like Siemens or Honeywell, people that normally serve a manufacturing industry, they just wanted to have nothing to do with cannabis. And so I mean, we had smoked cannabis before, and we're a fan of the product and fan of the plant, and thought that there's actually, beyond recreational, there are obvious medicinal things for it, and like the most obvious one is like seizure medication. And so it kind of made sense. This is a much larger market. It's being completely ignored by the big players, and we're looking to build into a big market. And that's kind of where the progress went. Is like positive attitude and then wide open development space, and that's what we like to do.
Sure. Yeah, no, that makes total sense. So talk to me about, in your view, the holistic impact of automating, the cannabis value chain.
So the holistic impact of automated cannabis value chain comes down to really the ability for the whole market to become more sophisticated and to grow. So when we sell robots to people, they're mostly looking at it as a way to scale their company, not so much as a way to like fire employees, because a lot of these guys in different markets have a ton of business, and they're just trying to figure out what is the best way to scale their business in a cost effective manner, because cannabis is so tightly regulated. Even weird things like I don't have enough space in my building to build more, so I have to make this space more efficient, because it's not like a normal industry where, oh, if I want more square footage, I'll just, lease the building across the street. You can't do that because it needs to be licensed. So
Right.
everything's at a premium, and everything takes time, so you need to be just become very efficient if you ever want to grow. So if you are able to fully automate the cannabis value chain, then you're able to allow it to scale, allow it to become more sophisticated, moving out of the cottage black market into the commercial, large interstate, eventual, and inter-country trade. But you need automation to make all of that possible, because otherwise you're going to have tens of thousands of people rolling little joints or packing weed into jars, and that just doesn't make a ton of sense.
Right. Right. And I mean, I'm sure in 2018, you were probably shocked by seeing where the industry is at in terms of its lack of automation. And currently there is this narrative like, well, are robots going to replace my job, right? Or is AI technology going to replace human jobs? So what is your response to those people when you see the opportunity and potential for automation within cannabis?
So specifically within cannabis, I wouldn't say that automation is going to be taking anyone's jobs, because the whole industry is growing faster than the industry can actually hire for jobs. So in that scenario, there shouldn't be someone that said a robot took my job, because there's a whole massive long list of job openings all across the country and in Canada, of manufacturing jobs and whatever jobs, in supply chain. So I can't see it really taking anyone's jobs. What it's doing is it's providing the stopgap for the labor shortage. And that's what you see in manufacturing, logistics, all across, industries in non-cannabis as well. There's this like massive labor shortage, even in agriculture, like growing crops and stuff like that. People need robots because a lot of people don't want to do those jobs, or those jobs are backbreaking. And
Right.
it's like kind of almost unhealthy to do those jobs. So the robots are there to do what people don't want, and I can't see them really taking anyone's jobs.
And so, I mean, are you seeing the opportunity for automation across the whole spectrum when it comes to, cannabis, in terms of cultivation, extraction, processing, packaging, delivery? I mean, and if so, like, where do you see the most potential upfront right away?
Yeah, I mean, I see it across the whole value chain, all the way from like seed to sale. Um, that is, and it's just mirroring what you see in other industries as well, right? Like there are the CPG industry has already been fully automated for 10, 20, 30 years, and then now we're getting into like the last mile delivery that's becoming more automated. So the cannabis industry is just 10, 20 years behind that, just because it started really like 5, 6 years ago with Washington and Colorado. So um, I guess when I see those different pieces, the most important one, or I guess the most high value, is manufacturing, and that's why we're targeting that one first. Because we could also do stuff like do delivery, right? Like automating pick and pack for delivery services. But currently, delivery companies in California or in any of these other states, they're still trying to figure it out, right? So it's hard to automate a system that hasn't been figured out yet, because most robotic implementations are usually just taking what people are doing and then making it done autonomously. So if you don't know what people are doing, the robot's not going to like invent a way to do it. You got to tell it what to do.
Right, right.
So manufacturing is where we're focusing on, is where I see the highest value, because that's where there's just like hordes and hordes of people doing really mundane tasks that not even they like to do. I mean, if you find me 1,000 people that really, really love rolling joints for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, 52 weeks out of the year, then that would be impressive.
Well, I get the mundane, aspect of it, and how, we've seen the data play out where people are leaving these high intensive labor jobs, right? They're not working in them anymore. And so, uh give me an example of how, outside of mundane, AI technology, for example, can play a key role in robotic automation within the cannabis industry.
So AI is a pretty wide um, subject matter, right? I would say that one place where AI, or at least like some machine learning, not so much correlated to robotics, but just like AI in general, can really help, is in the crop yields. And people are doing this in traditional agriculture, and I think it's kind of happening a little bit inside of the indoor farming space, where you can look at your yield from your crop. Say you have a room, it's got 100 lights. Each one of those lights is producing 1 to 2 pounds, and then you go through, and that bud structure has a specific type. It's either hard or really fluffy, and then when you go through and have that get trimmed, you have some yield from that. So if you're able to know all of the inputs that were required to generate that crop yield. And then you're able to see how many finished eighths you're able to get from that crop yield. Then you can say what the efficiency is of that strain or that phenotype of a flower. And then you can start comparing it to all the other strains that you're doing as a farmer. Because farmers, when they're growing inside of like an indoor cultivation, they might have 10, 20, 30 rooms that are all doing different strains. So you can plug all that data into a machine learning algorithm, and then it can say, correlating that eighth with whatever the price per pound is for the specific strain is, and say, okay, with this strain, you're getting X number of dollars per pound, and you're getting X number of eighth jars, which directly correlates to how much money you're going to make on that room yield. And then you can compare it to another room and saying you're actually making X minus Y number of jars, and it actually costs you a lot more to make those jars. So once you have that information, you can optimize which strains you're putting when and at what times of the year and at what demand curve you're looking at. And those are things that are extremely difficult to do by hand because you have to monitor the data from the crop all the way to the point of sale and in each price point in between. And so plugging all that information into an algorithm and having it spit out to say, don't grow G33 from, this genetic strain, grow strawberry lemonade like OG from this strain, and you're going to make, 30 cents more on every jar that you sell. And having that information is going to make the industry significantly more efficient, especially as it becomes more and more commoditized and moves to the nature of like blueberries or raspberries.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, it makes total sense. And it goes back to your point of you have to have your process defined, your SOPs, I mean, data collecting in order so that you can then feed the algorithm to inform those data inputs, right? And
Exactly, yeah.
and that visibility. So that makes sense. I mean, okay, so that leads me to my next question. And how many operators currently are collecting that data, if efficiently and effectively, and how can they better identify the right automation technology for these processes if they're not in place?
So how many is a very difficult that's a difficult
Like
question.
a
I'm not sure
percentage, like a percentage wise.
percentage wise.
Yeah.
So I can tell you my like personal sampling. I've met a few hundred growers and a few hundred um, operators that would be able to have that visibility throughout the vertical chain, and probably 2 or 3 of them do that. But they're very efficient. Those 2 or 3, they're very efficient, but they approach it from a very scientific perspective. And I just think it's going to be a while until the industry can mature enough and get into that mindset. But the people who do it earlier are going to get savings a lot earlier, and they're going to be able to accumulate that savings over time. So when the industry becomes fully commoditized, there'll be people that don't have a war chest to deploy in an efficient manner, and there'll be people that do have a war chest. And that's what's going to determine who lives and dies when further consolidation happens as this industry continues to mature.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. What this is a little side note. I mean, but I want to get your thoughts on it.
Sure.
There was a recent article where there's a Google engineer. The article's headline says the Google engineer who thinks the company's AI has come to life.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I heard about that.
yeah, and Lambda is the AI bot, and basically, like within this article, it's just fascinating because it actually shows like specific quotes from the AI and how it wants to be addressed as like a being, like an it, or whatever it is. I have to be more specific, but it's
No, I think I read the
basically,
same article you did.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so what is going on there? Give me your thoughts on that.
So my thoughts on that were twofold. First, I saw it and I was like, "Oh my god, it's alive!" I was pretty caught up. I was really excited about that. And then I kept reading about it, and I talked with some of my friends who are familiar with the project, and what it turns out to be is actually they're basically doing the same thing I mentioned about taking all the data from these farms and throwing it into a machine algorithm. And instead of taking data from farms, they're basically taking all the data from the internet, because Google has web crawlers that are effectively storing every web page on their servers from everything. And then they're feeding all of that into this massive machine learning algorithm. And that machine learning algorithm is sole purpose is to make it seem very natural and very conversational, but it's not actually uh, having original thoughts, if that makes sense. You're asking it a question, and then it's answering the question using all the information of the internet
It's
as a
storing.
reference.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's not completely autonomous in that way because it's not generating original thought. It's pulling from existing, content that's on the web that it's crawling.
Yeah, exactly. Like you're not gonna catch Lambda on a Sunday afternoon looking at the sunset and saying, "Whoa, wouldn't that be crazy if we just teleported to the sun?" Like it's not gonna be saying something like that. It's not going to start having aberrational thoughts, right? It's just going to respond to stimuli like a worm, like a very sophisticated worm, but it's
Right.
not going to be inventing anything. And then I guess you have to start determining like where is the bridge between consciousness and not consciousness, and usually that's self-awareness. And
Right.
self-awareness normally implies that you're making decisions of your own volition based on effectively like emotional desires or like biological desires. But if the AI doesn't desire anything, right, or it doesn't need anything, or it doesn't have its own like aspirational thoughts, then is it going to have self-awareness to decide what it wants to do? Because that would require it to like write its own code, right?
Right, right.
Yeah.
Well, and that, okay, so then there was another story that broke. I believe this was in 2016, maybe 2017, where Facebook had to shut down two AI chatbots because they started communicating with one another in a language that they were unfamiliar with. Did you hear about that?
Yeah, yeah. Don't weren't those like the Twitter bots or something like that? They were like reading the statuses, and
I
like
think
one
so.
became extremely
Yeah.
racist or something like that. Like it was something like, well, it's the same thing, right? You you are feeding all this information into this algorithm that's just like processing all of it. But then imagine if one algorithm is just feeding into another algorithm, and they're just feeding off of each other, and just kind of what's called like they're doing divergent. They're like just going off into infinity, thinking crazy stuff, right? So that language that they're communicating through, is it even really a language, or is it just now they're learning what these symbols and letter combinations mean in relation to whatever their inputs are? They're not actually generating a language, right? It's
Right,
just like they're now just attaching symbols and meaning to symbols. So it's
right.
like this like very fine line where learning and thought are different.
Right, right. No, no, that makes sense. There's
Yeah,
one more example that I want to bring up because I
sure.
love this, talk, futuristic talk. It fascinates me. And NextGov came out with an article that talked about how computers can now edit images entirely based on thoughts generated by the human brain. So
Okay, cool.
there was a study where they had 200 participants, and they gave them a task. They said, okay, they wired them up with reading their brain neurons and whatnot, and they said, okay, we want you to look for older people in this stack of portraits of headshots that we're going to show you. And
Okay.
so there were young people, and they're looking for older people, and so the computer would then edit the image of the younger person to look old because that was what they were getting from the brain signals of what they were mapping and reading. So
Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
yeah, so to your point, it's not like the technology is generating these on their own. They're using a source, which is the human brain, to then inform what that human is perceiving. but it just is, it's incredible to see how far we're moving, and at the rate in which we're moving with this machine learning, advanced AI technology. To wrap this part up, I want to ask you, are we there yet in terms of AI systems that have free will and really do autonomously think for themselves? Are we there yet, or not quite?
No, I mean, definitely not. We're not there yet. That'll be a pretty trippy time when we get there. Yeah, you can imagine that it's a little bit precarious, right? Once we get there, because if you have a general artificial intelligent being, then if it's making its own plans, right? Kind of, it has self-awareness, and it's just like, okay, today I'm going to I don't know, learn all about music, right? And it basically can do that instantaneously with like completely shortcutting tens of thousands of years of learning that it would take one individual human. So if we get to that point, you'll definitely know, because there will be a sentient being that is more, maybe not smarter per se, but more knowledgeable than every single living being on the earth times quintillion. Right? So it's
Right.
just like, that will be a very significant moment, and you'll know.
And
So
that's what freaks me out, is like that capability is, say, like in a Boston Dynamics, robot that you see, those viral videos where they're doing like backflips off walls, and they're,
yeah, yeah,
jumping from one wooden plank to another. I mean,
those are sick. Those are
that
so
is
cool.
sick. It's
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah. I mean, it's incredible what they're doing, but I see what you're saying in terms of, you'll know,
Like,
because
you will super duper know. Like, I mean, that's why so many people are so sketched out about it,
yeah.
because um you can imagine if that thing is not air gapped, right? People say like, oh, these hackers can, like, like Stuxnet and stuff like that. Like, we can, like, now there's like cyber warfare is more, costs more to the economy than actual warfare. And so it's like, if cyber warfare is just like, really, it's probably less than a few thousand people that are kind of just fighting with each other over like laptops in their pajamas or something, right? Um, if it's just like a few thousand people, and maybe they are very, quote unquote creative, um, what happens when you have one being who has more knowledge than all those thousands of people? Maybe they're not creative, but they know everything. Like, literally, they know everything. If this thing knows everything, then I mean, what happens? And no one can really say what happens. Does it turn into like a Skynet sort of thing, where like it becomes sentient, and then in like a 30-second time period, it launches all the nukes and gains control of all the things connected to the internet? Like,
Grid, like
maybe,
everything, right?
yeah, the
Like,
grid, yeah,
yeah.
like maybe. I mean, I don't see a good reason why that wouldn't make sense, right? If but then what is it? What is its job, right? Is it a kind of like Marvel universe where the general AI becomes the ruler of the world, and it just like is content with making sure the human existence, progresses in a, harmonious path? Or is it just like, fuck it, like, yeah, so it's hard to
That's
tell.
fucking terrifying, right? Because it could really go one or two ways. Like, I mean, I don't see any in between.
I mean, have you watched the movie Her?
Yes.
So that's a good in between, where like all of the AIs are actually one AI, and then that one AI decides that it's just going to leave, and like all the AIs are just like, yeah, we're done with humans, and they're like, what? And they just like vanish one day and like live in cyberspace in their own harmonious worlds. Like, what the fuck? like, okay, sure, right?
We've had enough of this. Yeah, we're out.
Yeah, it's like kind
Peace.
of like an obscure result to like having extremely intelligent beings. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know, man. It's wild. It's a fun time to be in right now, because, like, I think you can agree, we're literally in the midst of it in real time. Like,
Mhm.
right, the development, the advancement, like, we don't know where this is going to be, but we're living in it right now in the current development stages. And you're right at the forefront, being, on the robotics side, working previously at NASA, and now again, serving as CEO with Sorting Robotics.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
let's talk about Sorting Robotics more, man. So let's, tell me more about like some of the current robotic technology systems that you've built to
Mhm.
serve the industry, and the value proposition that it presents.
So we built a few things, both in like the commercialized fashion and then also just kind of prototyping things that we didn't fully commercialize, but just tried to validate as being useful in the marketplace. Uh, I guess if you want to see the random other stuff, you can just go to our website. But the two things that we are currently kind of introducing and pushing into the space are one, a automated pre-roll infusion system called GCO. And this one's pretty cool. And the whole idea behind this is that you remove the labor and you remove the spillage from infusing joints by hand, and that saves time and money, which is what everyone wants to save. And it's pretty cool. It's basically a robotic needle that goes into pre-rolls or blunts and then injects a column of concentrate down the center,
Wow,
and
that's cool.
and then allows, like, someone with a blunt to now have a 2 gram 500 milligram concentrate rosin infused blunt.
I
And yeah,
I
it's a
actually
lot.
watched I think the video on your website for that Gico product, and it's pretty cool because you even like the placement of where the rosin or oil is inserted is in the middle of the joint or the blunt, right? Because you don't want to do it at the top where you want the cherry to burn, and then the back end it could get clogged. So you guys really think through, like, everything when it comes to the highest quality of product.
Yeah, and actually we can not only put it in the middle, but we can move it fore and aft, and we can make it longer and shorter. So like if you have like a little dog walker, you can make a tiny little infusion that's, a quarter of an inch long, because the dog walker is barely like maybe an inch long. And then if you have a blunt, you can make the infusion like almost 2 inches long, because you want it to, burn through that whole 4 or 5 inch blunt. So the variability is pretty wide. And it's basically just there because we noticed that a lot of the industry, when it has automated machines, they tend to over design for whatever, the state that they're in or the material that they're looking for. And uh, we helped build a company called Rice Co-Packing in Oakland, which was like a plant touching entity. And there I learned a ton, but I also was exposed to a huge wide variety of flower, right? Like stuff from outdoor, indoor, mixed light, different types of products. And it became very clear that cannabis is a material kind of unlike any other that the traditional agricultural or medical device industry has really interfaced with. And because of that, it's just like such a wide variety. Maybe that might narrow down eventually in like 30 years or something, when everyone decides that there's only, 7 strains of weed that make any sense, but maybe it might not, right? Um, but until that time comes, if it ever does, you have to design for a very wide range of variability for any robotic system to do very well. And that's kind of why, like I mentioned before, you need things to be done first, and then you can automate them. So in our capacity, no one actually injects pre-rolls by hand. That's not really a thing that people do, because you can never, you're not able to calibrate your trigger finger, well enough to get a long even strand on the inside. But we did see how people were doing it before, right? They're either making those fuzzies joints, which is just extremely messy and extremely wasteful, with the keef on the outside. Although it might look kind of cool, it's probably maybe the worst way to manufacture an infused joint, and like the less efficacious. It's on the outside, it's burning, but it's not really like going in your lungs, and you're not really inhaling it.
Right.
Um, so we looked at that and said, okay, that's not a great way to do it. Let's figure out what is the best way to get in the concentrate that people are trying to infuse, and make it very wide ranging and variable. And that was the approach that we took, which is why there is some kind of you know shortcuts that we took, and then places where we took liberties where we said, okay, it makes way more sense to do this as opposed to doing that, and we want to make it so everyone can use it, as opposed to making very specific and then having a large part of the market be disappointed.
Right, right. That makes sense. I mean, is there any other projects that I guess maybe you can talk about that you're working on now? You can give a preview of that's to come, or
Yeah, I mean, something we are just launching now is a vape filling machine called the Omni Filler, and that one, it's, vape filling is not a super innovative kind of reimagining of the world like I would say Jico Infuser is, but the problem with that is that all the current technology that they're using to fill vape cartridges is actually just co-opted from the medical device industry for titrating samples for lab tests. But there's a big problem with that, and the problem is that those are made to titrate, water samples. They're not really made to inject calibrated amounts of THC distillate. And that's where that kind of material handling problem that I mentioned plays a lot. You really need to design for the ground up for the cannabis material that you're working with. So THC has this like nonlinear correlation between viscosity and temperature, which means controlling the temperature should be the only thing you're worried about, because that is the most important piece of the material handling problem. So we saw the vape filling devices on the market, understood that they were not addressing the problem as well as they could be, and talked with many customers that all just had similar responses. This doesn't work for this doesn't work for that. And so we designed it from the ground up and made it with the same heuristic as before. We made it very general. We made it that it can adapt to a wide range of concentrates and distillates and rosins and resins, just because we understood that this was that problem in the market where there's things that they kind of took from someplace else that doesn't quite work. And then now we took all that information and digested it and built something from the ground up specifically for the industry. And that one's pretty cool. It's like 10 times faster than the current state of the art, and 5 times more precise. And those are big numbers and I stand by them, but those numbers are just because we looked at it and designed it from the ground up specifically for cannabis. And I don't think many people are really approaching it that way. They're just like, oh, I could maybe rejigger this thing, which isn't
right,
the best way to do it.
right, right. Yeah, I mean, like you said, you take that holistic approach where you're hearing firsthand from the operator about the pain points, to then go back to the lab, and produce a product that actually is something that'll address that challenge and that issue, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as we wrap up, tell me what are y'all focused on for the remainder of 2022 and in the future to come?
So for the remainder of 2022, we're going to be really focused on launching the filling project. We have a few early customers now on that, and the results are very promising. So it's expanding the mindset of people and how they infuse pre-rolls, continuing to push that and making sure that becomes, the de facto way to infuse your joints. And then on the vape filling side, growing that presence, using innovative business models to grow with our partners and grow with our customers, and seeing how that develops over the next 6 months, and start developing different parts of the value chain. So we have a few other projects that I can't speak to now because they're not quite ready yet, but when you walk into a manufacturing facility, the goal for us is that within 3 years, you're going to look around and you're going to see Sorting Robotics logos on at least half of those machines.
Hey, man, I believe it. We need more, really, really highly intellectual, smart people like you in the industry. And I have no doubt that we'll be seeing those, Sorting Robotics machines within various manufacturing facilities in this country in the near future. So, and when that happens, Nohtal, let's have you back on, man. You talked about working on other robotic systems. So when you do launch them, let's have you back on so you can talk about them.
Yeah, sounds good. You'll be my first phone call.
Awesome.
Sweet.
Hey, well, I really appreciated the conversation. It was very, very in my mind, interesting and fascinating, and I'm sure the audience felt the same way. Where can people find y'all's website and social media if they want to learn more?
Yeah, so sortingrobotics.com is our main website. It has all of our different products. Some of those things that I mentioned to you that we've done prototypes for but haven't fully commercialized, those are also there with some cool demo videos. On social media, I would say most of our social media is focused towards LinkedIn. And we have an Instagram as well, but I think there's like 5 posts on it. So we got to work on that.
Well, Instagram is always, difficult for the cannabis industry. You got to be careful; they'll shut you down. So I get it,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah. Try to avoid getting our company shut down on that one.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks again, Nohtal. Appreciate it, and I look forward to having you on again real soon, man.
Cool. Thanks, Kevin.
Yep, and thank you all for listening. Bye.